This episode of the Cosmic Skeptic podcast is brought to you by you. To support the podcast, please visit patreon.com/Cosmic Skeptic. So welcome back, everybody, to the Cosmic Skeptic podcast, an opportunity to break away from my normal style of videos and have more long-form conversations, and usually with interesting guests. And today I'm joined by Anthony Magnabosco, who I just met. And you may notice, if you're watching this on YouTube rather than listening on iTunes or something, that this is not the place where I usually record my podcasts, but you might still recognize it, and that's because we're currently at the atheist community of Austin.
That's right.
Which is great, because today I'm going to be on the Atheist Experience, so you'll be watching this in the future. Check out the episode that aired on the 28th of April. It's me and Matt Dillahunty. We're going to be hosting the Atheist Experience. I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to do this before the shows all start.
I'm really honored to be sitting down with you and chatting about whatever we want to chat about. And the hosts here have been really kind to open up the studios to let us do this before Talk Heathen starts and then before you're on with the Atheist Experience.
Yeah, it's totally surreal to see my logo in the back.
I would imagine it's surreal.
It's strange.
It's got to be a whirlwind trip for you, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it's been such a quick trip out to Texas, and while I've been here, I've been doing so much, and I've been getting some great interviews. And Faithless Forum was yesterday, which went really well. Mm-hmm. Was a great time, and now I'm here doing this, and then tomorrow it's back to the UK, and I've got an essay due as soon as I jump.
Do you really? Well, I know we were trying to coordinate something where maybe we can go out and do some street epistemology together, but you just didn't have enough time, I think, in your schedule.
We might find time tomorrow, maybe.
Possibly, yes. I've been talking to some people at a local university with the Secular Student Alliance in Austin, at UT Austin. Maybe we can go out and do some SE together.
That'd be great.
Wouldn't that be?
It depends on the weather and the time, but if we get it done, again, people will be watching this in the future, so that might be something that's already.
It may have already happened, or yep.
But if not, then the next year, if I come back out for the forum, I'll stay for a hell of a lot longer, because I've realized that I probably should have done that with all the opportunities that are out here. But okay, so
excellent.
Look, because this was all kind of like thrown together last minute when we realized we'd have the opportunity, I haven't planned at all what I want to talk to you about. However, I trust, and I think I have good reason to believe that you're something of a good conversationalist. So
thanks.
You're, I think, probably most known for your street epistemology, right? That's
pretty much.
That's what you do.
That's sort of my claim.
You're kind of like you seem to be like the face of street epistemology.
I never really set it out to be that. I read a book that told me about street epistemology, and I started going out and having conversations and then recording them, putting them online, and then a community started forming. Practitioners started forming. We started figuring out ways to do this better, ways to have better conversations where you're using questions to explore sensitive belief claims.
Right, yeah, because I mean, people listening might not know what it is. So street epistemology, what are we talking about there?
It's not the best term to really describe what we're doing, but in a nutshell, it's where rather than engaging with somebody where you're arguing, ridiculing, or maybe giving them facts that might close a person down, it's asking them to explain how they arrived at their conclusion, and being patient and listening, repeating it back so you can fully understand what they're saying. Right. And oftentimes in the process, if you ever try that approach, you may have, in fact, I'm not sure, what you tend to find is that the person starts to realize that maybe I didn't really think this through. Perhaps the reasons that I'm giving aren't the reasons, or maybe there are better reasons to justify thinking that this is true.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a Socratic method of just questioning, getting people to kind of see their own chains of reasoning rather than trying to point it out. Pretty much. I try to look at it as a tool set. I might not actually break out this tool if I was engaging with a street preacher and there were other people listening. I might actually take a more aggressive approach and give them facts or give them a verse that contradicts what they say, not to help them reflect on their beliefs, but maybe somebody else listening. Right.
The thing is, though, most of us don't find ourselves in those situations. We're sitting down with our parents who we may disagree with about politics or other social issues or religion or whatever. And if you try that approach, it's probably not going to end up very well for you. So I was really excited when I learned about street epistemology because I was having bad conversations.
Yeah. And I imagine it's probably vastly improved your ability to have conversations with friends and family because you kind of get the practice in almost when you're
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's calmed me down. I used to be a very aggressive it might be hard to if most people are familiar with my videos, it might be hard to imagine it, but I have videos where I've gone out and literally harassed street preachers, for example.
I can't imagine it.
It really has happened. And when you start to realize how unproductive that is,
right,
you start reflecting on, well, what are my motivations? What are my objectives? What am I hoping to achieve? Do I value that relationship? Mm-hmm. And if you start to realize that, no, I want to help this person because maybe they're thinking something is untrue, and I value that relationship. So then you really start assessing the tools that are available to you.
Yeah. So epistemology is the study of knowledge. So when you say street epistemology, you're essentially in the street going up to people at random. Like you don't kind of organize it or anything. You just kind of find people walking down the road, and you try to make them understand the way in which they come to know things. Is that a good summary of what
the latter part of that? I think that's correct. We do want to actually having conversations where we're engaging with people to help them reflect on how they are coming to say that I know that this is true, or that I believe that this is true, or that I think that it's true. Mm-hmm. So epistemology itself, that word is somewhat problematic because I'm not so much interested in what you are claiming to know, or anything along those lines per se. Mm-hmm. Some people say, I know Jesus is real. Okay, we can still engage. But the first part of that, I just want to clarify, very, very few people who practice the method of street epistemology go out and initiate talks with strangers on the street. That is unusual. That is weird.
Right.
But there are a fraction of people who do, and our exchanges are probably the most visible that are out there. Mm-hmm. Normally you wait. So you're in a car, the Uber driver says something, it's an opportunity to engage with them using this method. Right. You're at a dinner with a family, your uncle makes a comment about Benghazi, you can engage with them using this method. Mm. But how do we teach people how to do this? And one of the ideas was, well, let's go out and engage with people, record the conversations, put them online and see what happens.
Yeah, okay. So the reason I think this is important for people listening is because, like you say, this is a method that allows you to have more constructive conversations, and that should be the aim of I think what we're doing here, and what I'm doing with this podcast and both of our channels seem to be kind of aimed at that shared goal of making sure that we can discuss ideas in a practically meaningful and productive sense. That's
one piece of it. Like ultimately, though, I think the goal is to figure out if we're thinking that something is true when it may not be.
Right.
So if we discover through the course of a Socratic dialogue or a street epistemology dialogue that the methodology that I'm using to arrive at a conclusion, or a methodology that I'm using to validate my justifications is unstable, it's unreliable, then I might want to take another look at the confidence that I'm placing in my claim.
Right.
So yes, it's nice to be cordial and have a conversation and have it be somewhat productive, but the productive nature of that, I think, is helping a person reflect on their steps and maybe even backing off of their certainty.
Right.
Maybe even increasing their certainty. I've actually had that happen sometimes.
Sure. Because they kind of just elucidate the chain of reasoning that they've used to come to a conclusion, and then they've actually found it to be even stronger when they come away from the conversation.
Possibly. Or if we aren't forming our beliefs intentionally, it's conceivable that maybe we're coming up with reasons to explain why we think something is true on the fly. But regardless, I still think that the questioning approach is really helpful.
Yeah, okay, but so somebody might criticize you and say, like, I mean, who are you to go out and say, hey, like, you say you know this, well, let me tell you that you probably don't, and let's talk it out. Like, is this something that you are able to apply to yourself? Because I know, like, it's a goal to strive for. Like everybody says, of course, I try to challenge my own convictions, but it seems like quite a tricky thing to do because, like you say, a lot of the time the beliefs we hold are kind of unconsciously arise, and we don't really know why we believe them or how we know them, and that must be the case for yourself as well. So, like, what about when this is happening with you? Like, are you able to apply that to yourself?
Sure. So you said something really interesting at the start there. You said, "Let me tell you." And I want to be very clear.
I knew you'd pick me up on that.
when there's a common misconception that we're going out and telling people that they're mistaken because we have it all figured out. And one way to be really bad at street epistemology is to walk into it with that attitude. I think we should try to approach the majority of the conversations that we engage with, especially if we're using an approach like that,
right,
is to set aside our biases, set aside the views that we've already formed, and really listen to them and hear them out and not tell them. Even if you can discover with them that they don't have a good justification or their methodology is faulty, that's typically where our conversation ends. We don't then go the next step to say, well, let me now tell you, here's a book by Richard Dawkins, or have you checked out Cosmic Skeptic or something like that? Now, sometimes they ask for information. Like, you've really got me thinking. Where do you think I can go to meet other people who think this way? Blah, blah, blah.
And you tell them Cosmic Skeptic. give them a link.
It's the first.
I can give you some business cards.
There we go. There we go. Yeah.
So you don't. You kind of like being here and being part of this community. This is very much a kind of based on religiosity, religious claims and things like that. But I mean, you don't have a particular area of discussion, or do you? Can you kind of talk about absolutely anything? Is that the goal here? Like, when you say you want to go and find out why people think they know what they know, is that kind of any knowledge claim, or are you like more comfortable, or will only talk about certain knowledge claims?
Right. And it's just dawning on me that there was a previous part of your last question that I had neglected to answer, and I think that was you were wondering. Now it's kind of slipping.
Oh, like how to apply it to yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing too. This is a tool that the practitioners of it ourselves use, and we sometimes even actively seek out conversations with folks. Where, let's say I'm thinking about voting for a particular candidate. It's not unusual for people to go to the various street epistemology communities on Discord, Facebook, Reddit, whatever, and say, I'm thinking about voting for her, but I'm not exactly sure. Is there somebody out there willing to engage with me on this? So while you could even use it on yourself solo, which I do,
you can kind of pull it out of other people and have them sort of apply it to
help me kick the tires on this belief a little bit.
Yeah.
And then to go to your next question, you can absolutely use this on any claim, I think. It tends to seem it seems to be more effective when it's about a fact claim that somebody's making rather than an opinion.
Right.
So like, let's say you say, well, my favorite ice cream is vanilla. That might be kind of tough to SE. And yet if you said, well, I think vanilla is healthier for me because it has less calories, then I think that's a fact claim that we can probably explore together.
That's an easier conversation.
But my preference, honestly, I love talking to people about whether they think a God exists or not.
Yeah.
Because there are so many other beliefs that are built on that one.
For sure, yeah.
My stance on pornography, the way that I'm going to vote, what I want taught in schools, etc.
Yeah.
So if we can have a really good, profound conversation where a person comes to realize, oh my goodness, I don't have a good justification for thinking that there's a God. I used a really unreliable process. I really need to think this through. We can understand the implications of that on these other views.
Yeah. So like, how long are the conversations usually that you have out on the street?
They can vary anywhere from 5 minutes to 50 minutes. My preference is to keep them really brief.
Yeah. And do you get, have you had much experience with people having almost like a complete U-turn? Because I know that a lot of the time people will come away saying, you know what, like, yeah, I'll go and think about that. And it can, I imagine that probably fills you with pride to think like, wow, that person's going to go and think about this now. But have you ever experienced someone really just kind of on the spot just be like, you know what, man, I got this wrong?
It's happened. And when it does, as a skeptical kind of person, I begin to wonder, are they using a reliable process and good justifications for backing off of their confidence? If they're that willing to move so quickly, then it kind of makes me wonder about their filter, how they are approaching claims. Are they deferring to me because I'm older and maybe they're in their 20s or something? Or, who knows?
Or because like, more what you're talking about.
Possibly.
Or something, like, people just kind of go like, wow, I guess you're right.
Exactly. Like they might address me as sir and be deferential to me.
Right.
I don't want people backing off their confidence for bad reasons either.
So it's like you want to, it's not about necessarily the end goal or making sure that people have true beliefs. It's like the method by which they get there that you're kind of focusing on.
Well, I kind of think that if you are discovering that your method is unreliable, you probably should be less confident that what you're thinking is true.
Okay.
And yet it doesn't mean that that thing is not true. Right? Like if I'm basing my conclusion that Jesus is real on faith and I come to realize faith is unreliable.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that the belief that you predicated on the faith is false.
Jesus could still be real,
but
it might cause me to search for better reasons to come to that conclusion, or if I discover that I don't, then I might back off on it.
Right, sure.
But yes, I do run into people who come up to me. In fact, just 2 days ago, I had a wonderful second conversation with a woman. I cannot wait to edit the video and put it on my YouTube channel. Our first conversation was about truth, and she said, I'm willing to believe something, even if it's not true, if I get value and comfort from it. And then by the end of a 20-minute talk on camera, she said, you know what? I do value truth. And even though it might be painful, I'm willing to get rid of beliefs that are not true, or that are likely not true.
No, go ahead.
Second conversation, she came back. This happened 2 days ago. And we shifted to a claim. She's roughly 90% confident that spirits are real, to the point where if somebody recently dies and they're a family member, you should leave out water for them so that they can drink it because they can get thirsty on their journey out. Right. So I listened to her. We explored it. We explored the quality of the evidence that she requires to move down, which was the standard was very high, in order for her to be convinced that those weren't the footsteps of her dead relative. She needed evidence, good evidence. Then we compared it to the evidence that she has to move her up, and she came to realize on her own by me asking questions, maybe that's not so solid.
Right. And is it usually the case that when you're having these conversations, the questions that you're asking, because I know you're not making an argument as such, but you could be seen as kind of implicitly supporting a view in order to challenge the view that they hold, even just through asking questions. Is the view that you're kind of representing, let's say, usually the view that you personally hold?
It can be. So many times I run into people who share the same views that I have. My method for engaging with them does not change at all. So I've used this approach with atheists who are, they maybe are even a little stronger. They're 100% sure there's no God. And I've had conversations with folks like that have backed off of their certainty. So I don't change my approach. I recognize I have biases. I recognize that I don't think spirits are real. I recognize that it might be helpful for her to probably discover that that's the case, although I'm open to the possibility, and we really did respectfully and sincerely investigate her reasons. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm interested. Like, would you be capable of doing it? Like, for an absurd belief that you couldn't possibly hold yourself. Like, if somebody said, "Yeah, what I want to talk to you is about the fact that I believe the Earth is a globe," and you want to kind of challenge that and
a globe or a flat? I mean,
they think it's a globe, and you're obviously trying to make them think that maybe it's flat.
Oh, I see.
Would the methodology still kind of work there? Would you still be able to employ it, or are there some beliefs or some beliefs that are so true, that is so obviously true, that you wouldn't be capable of presenting a good challenge to that?
That's a good question. I don't think the questions that I would ask and the way that I would go about it would be exactly the same. However, the conversations would probably be shorter. But what would probably happen in that situation is that a person might realize that they are having difficulty explaining why they think the Earth is a globe, even though it likely factually is true.
Right.
And that still is healthy. So even recognizing the epistemic humility that one might need for even something that we're sure is true could still be valuable. So it might be a shorter conversation than I might have with somebody who thinks the Earth is flat. But I think the outcome could very well be the same. Wow. I really only think that this is true because I was told it, or I watched the documentary, or everyone else thinks it. Reasons that are probably not the best things to put forward. Yeah. And it might cause a person to actually say, you know what, I really need to be able to adequately do a test and figure out how we can actually figure out that this is true.
When, and this might be a difficult question, but when was the last time you recognized that in yourself? Can you remember the last time that you realized, here's a belief I hold that actually I'm not entirely sure why I hold it, or if I should be holding it?
It happens a lot, and I find myself doing it almost on a daily basis.
Really?
For sure. Driving down the road, I see a billboard, and I think, oh yeah, that's true, that's going to happen. And then instinctively now I ask myself these questions. But on larger issues, this happens too. So if you were to ask me where I stood on guns, for example, open carry weapons, which you may have even seen people walking around with guns in Texas, I'm not sure.
Not yet, but I mean, it's totally alien to me.
It wouldn't be, yeah. And it was alien, and I had a visceral reaction to seeing it, to the point where I would go out and counter-protest people who held those views. I started talking with them, asking them questions, and my certainty that that's a bad idea is decreasing.
Right.
Now I'm not 100%, and I'm not going to be advocating for it, but I can understand the arguments better. So it is shifting my view.
To be clear, you mean you were protesting kind of pro-Second Amendment people?
Yes.
Pro-open carry people.
I was against open carry, and now I'm a little bit more in favor of it.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so I'm seeing my views change on that.
And how long did that take to kind of move that?
2-3 years.
Right. So it's a long process.
Right. In fact, there's a video on my channel with a woman where we talk about that very issue.
Yeah, I think I might have seen that one actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, because you've covered a whole host of I'm interested to rewind to this conversation you had about truth and the value of truth. Was that you representing a view that you think that you believe in yourself, that truth has kind of an inherent value, and that we should seek truth regardless of its consequences, let's say?
I think my presupposition is that the more true things that we believe, the better it will be for our lives and for humanity as a whole. Right.
And are there exceptions to that for you?
There are, sure. So I've met some people where I'll engage with them in a conversation, and they say, this has literally happened, where they say, I'm suffering from depression. I've tried all sorts of medicines for the last 5 years, and it's only the blood of Jesus that's getting me through the day. I'm now able to go to college and study and do well here because Jesus is getting me through it. Now, I don't think Jesus is real. I'm fairly certain that I can engage with that woman in conversation for 30 minutes or an hour, maybe 2 sessions would be ideal, where there's time in between for her to think. And she would probably significantly lower her confidence in that belief or abandon it. I ended the conversation. So there are situations, Alex, where I don't do it.
Right.
I've even written a blog post about this, when to abstain from using this approach, when to abstain from using street epistemology.
And that presumably is in cases when striving after truth is not the principal, most important kind of thing here. There's something more important than truth.
That's a good point. Now you're making me think and giving me a spider moment here, which is usually the result of these questions that I ask other people.
You know, it's tricky because it's easy to say we should strive for as many true things as possible. And I think it's an admirable goal, but clearly that can't be, there has to be a line somewhere, because the reductio ad absurdum of this is to say, well, what if it were the case that there was a proposition, the truth of which made it such that somebody had the capability to destroy the planet? Like, do you want them to know that? Like, probably not.
I see.
And so obviously that's an extreme example, but you can just make it less extreme and less extreme. And somewhere there has to be a point at which we say, this is where we stop valuing truth.
And that line may actually be harm, because with street epistemology, one of the first, and there are no formal rules. We're in the process of forming a 501c3 formal organization for this.
Oh, great.
To maybe come up with some standards, I don't know. But yeah, not harming people is a really important goal.
Yeah, because, I mean, for me, meta-ethically speaking, I think that morality breaks down to well-being in a roundabout way. I know a lot of people think that. I don't agree with many of the ways in which people think it breaks down to well-being, but I think it ultimately has to. And so part of my ethical framework is the desirability of well-being. And the desirability of pleasure, and in fact that the only thing that's desired in itself, as Mill said, is pleasure. And when you say you desire a thing, you actually technically desire the thing that derives from it. So I think that truth kind of falls in that remit. So I see it as the reason we value truth is because the more truth we have, generally speaking, the more pleasurable our experiences will be, because a truth is usually conducive to better society,
reduce suffering.
Exactly, yes. But so because truth, the value of truth is just a subset of the value of pleasure, or well-being is probably a better word here, when it begins to conflict and you've got a situation where truth actually isn't a derivative of well-being, then there's no problem with saying, yeah, I don't want the truth here, because you recognize that truth is only a derivative. So you only value it predicated on the value of well-being.
That's a really good point. And sometimes during a conversation, the most recent example is coming to my mind with the woman where we had the talk about truth, and then later the second conversation about spirits, where oftentimes when I meet somebody and it seems, I'm getting the impression perhaps that they have a higher dependency on comfort maybe than most people, I'll sometimes even just ask them, if we continued this conversation and you came to realize that this wasn't true, what kind of impact on your life are we talking about? And then depending on and I try to ask this regardless of a person's age. They could be 90 now, I'll still engage with them. Yeah. If they say, listen, I value truth. It might be painful. I might hurt my back moving that, metaphorically here, moving that belief that's not true out of the way. But I want to have as many true beliefs as possible, darn the consequences. And then I'll usually engage with them.
Yeah. Are there any Are there any issues on which you can see yourself beginning to change your mind, and you think that you might be at the beginning of one of those kind of, like with the gun advocacy thing? Are there any issues that every time you've spoken about them, you begin to think, you know what, I think I might be beginning to move in this direction?
Yes, I'm going through that right now with veganism.
Yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people have said that to me, and my listeners and my viewers, if people are watching on video, are probably going to get incredibly annoyed at me, because every time, ever since I've started talking about it, it seems that it comes up every single time. But there's a reason for that, and it's because when you talk about ethics and when you talk about discussing ideas and bad ideas and changing people's minds, it's like, well, the big one is for everyone seems to be veganism. And I've spoken to everybody about it since I've been here in Texas, and it's just been a case of people saying, you know what, like, I think someday I'm just might have to do it. Like everybody seems to be on this road. It's really bizarre. It's like everyone seems to recognize it, and yet nobody's taking that step. Well, I mean, what do you think it would?
Perhaps people just don't know what the next step is, or there needs to be some sort of momentum where 40% of the population is doing it, and it's not unusual.
Maybe,
and there's other options that are just as tasty, and lab-grown meat or whatever. There probably just needs to be a cultural shift, and then more and more people will get on board with it. But that is one of those things where I find myself struggling with and wondering about myself. And I would not be surprised if 10 years from now, 5 years from now, I was vegan.
Yeah.
I really
what do you think it would take? As somebody who is pretty much an expert in the process of changing minds at this point, like, do you have an idea of the kind of thing that it would be necessary to occur for you to say, that's it, I'm changing my lifestyle here? I think this isn't so much changing your mind as changing like the way your behavior.
Right? Honestly, I think it would just be options, other options that were available to me. So rather than reaching for this package, I reach for this package.
So if
and they're comparable in price, really, I would pay 3 times as much for a vegan option that tasted just as good.
Right. Okay. And so I'll ask you a question that I actually asked Matt on the previous podcast that people should hopefully have listened to, where we talked about veganism in depth, actually, which is this: if I could hypothetically create a situation in which every time you went for a meal, you could make sure that your food did not come from a factory farm, and it would cost the same and give you the same nutrition and everything. If we could create a hypothetical situation where that was the case, do you think you'd go vegan?
You neglected to mention taste. Was taste part of the option too? Your hypothetical?
I mean, the food tastes good, yeah.
It tastes good? Yeah, I think that would probably do it for me.
Okay, here's the gotcha moment. We're in that situation. Like, that is the situation we're in. You can go and have a meal that tastes nice. It might not taste the same, but it tastes nice. It's not bad food. And the thing is, like, even if it were bad food, even if food needed to become just a purely functional thing for me, and I hated every meal I had, I still think the ethical argument is strong enough to say that we should still do it. But not even in that situation. You can have a nice meal. It can be just as expensive. It can be just as nutritious. That's the situation we're in. And so the reason I'm asking you, like, what do you think it might take to make you do it? It's like, but a lot of those conditions have already been fulfilled.
Now, see, I was not aware of that. So what it would take might actually be somebody simply telling me that there are adequate options to meet my current expectations when it comes to food.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, so it obviously it depends on the individual, and I don't know Texas nearly as well as I know my home city, but there are plenty of options, and I found it a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. But I mean, so would you say that you're kind of because again, we're talking here about behavior rather than the idea, but talking about the idea itself, are you still like on the fence, or are you kind of on one side and you think your behavior might catch up to it, or is it still like the actual idea itself is not settled in your mind? Because I'm just interested. It might be a good opportunity to whichever side of the argument you want to take, to sort of give an example of the kind of conversations that you would have by sort of talking out the issue. Because obviously, I hope my listeners don't think that I'm just rehashing what I did with Matt. But when I did it with Matt, it was a meta-ethical discussion. But I think it'd be interesting. It's a good topic to kind of demonstrate the effectiveness of street epistemology.
Yeah, for sure. And what's interesting is that there are people, not to get too far off the topic, like I think you've actually probably, even this short amount of time, probably swayed me a little bit in one direction.
Already?
Yeah.
Well, we're making progress.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if being aware of this approach and the type of flawed thinking that we have might make us more susceptible to reflection, skepticism, perhaps, humility for people that are holding views that we disagree with, whatever. What's interesting is that there are a lot of people who they discover street epistemology and they also have a side interest like veganism or open carry or whatever, atheism. I mean, this was born in atheism. And then they say, this is a great vehicle. This is a great technique to engage with people to explore their claims. And then usually they go a step further. This is maybe where street epistemology stops and you start telling people, like you say, by the way, have you watched this video about veganism?
Right.
Or did you realize the fact of the matter regarding how much water is consumed in order to raise a cow or something?
Yeah, I mean, like the contributions to climate change, it's like there's the ethical argument, there's the climate argument, which can become an ethical argument, and it's crazy. It's like the easiest thing you can do to solve the biggest ethical crisis that we're currently facing, and also the biggest climate crisis that we're currently facing. The easiest way that you can do it is simply when you go to a restaurant, say, you know, I won't have that, I'll have that instead. And you can solve all of these problems by this one thing. So I'm interested, if you as somebody who is known for doing this, like, how would you talk me out of it? Or how would you try to make myself talk myself out of it? How would you make me think like, am I right here? Have I got because my current position is as simple as we have a duty to minimize unnecessary suffering.
I think I would approach that topic the same way that I would approach anything. I wouldn't approach it as, Alex thinks that this is a way of life, I don't like it, and I need to change his mind. So what we do with street epistemology is kind of the opposite of what you might see with like a Steven Crowder, where he sets up a table and says, change my mind on some topic. This is more about exploring how you came to your conclusion.
Right.
And if you can adequately explain it and put forward good justifications that you can back up, that are testable, repeatable.
Oh, then your job's done, right? You don't actually need to.
Right.
Because the whole point is trying to make sure that reason and justification
That's
is
right.
there.
Yeah. So street epistemology is not just to topple every belief claim that people make.
Yeah.
It's to probe it to see, what did you base this on? And is it solid? Is it something that I should possibly adopt?
Right. I would love to see you sit down with Steven Crowder on one of those episodes. That would be something to behold, I think.
I think he sets up sometimes in Austin, if I'm not mistaken.
You should try and make it down there. See if you can sit down and
we'll see.
Tell him what you do.
But
I think you'd like it.
The thing with street epistemology, it seems the venue is really critical. Yeah. So I was at a conference in Cincinnati, and there were protesters. There was an outside rally. There were protesters, people promoting a young Earth. That was not the appropriate venue. I would have loved to have had a conversation with a young Earth creationist to explore why they think the Earth is young, why they think the Bible is true, what method are they using to conclude that those reasons warrant a high degree of confidence. But it was cold, it was rainy, there was a crowd of atheists, there was a throng. It's very hard to help a person open up and become reflective in that environment. So you have to think about the venue, your audience. There's a lot at stake. Me talking to Steven Crowder on camera, do you think he's going to be pretty guarded? I would think that he probably would, as opposed to him and I sitting down for coffee, for example, and exploring his stance on gender. Yeah, sure. But would that be something that you'd want to do with a person like that? Absolutely, for sure.
Are there any types of people or types of arguments that you just will not engage with?
I almost said the presuppositionalist argument, but even that I've engaged with people because my first need, just in a nutshell for people unfamiliar, it's where you basically assert, listen, I know that this is true because we can know things. That's kind of it in a nutshell. There's different variations and so forth. It strikes me as very disingenuous. It strikes me as a last-ditch effort to maintain a belief. It's even possibly more desperate than faith because I can simply just assert that it's the case. However, there are some people who are presuppositionalists that I will engage with. Yeah.
Okay, so you kind of disparaged faith a little bit there. I think that's something that happens a lot probably in this room. And I'm on your side there. I'm interested, though, to pick your brains a bit, especially because usually when you're on YouTube, it's not you who's doing the talking. You know,
I'm not in the hot seat.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I think it's quite fun, and people might.
Not usually. Sometimes I am.
But so you've got a problem with faith.
Well, it depends on what.
What do you mean when you use the word? What did you mean?
Yes. So that's the critical thing here is how are people defining it?
Yeah. And what's your definition?
My definition of faith, based on thousands of conversations that I've had with people, and probably 800 or so who have said, I think that this is true because of faith, I think it's being defined as untestable trust. Now, when I engage with somebody, I don't even mention this word. This is a slippery word that needs to be unpacked. Because people can say, I'm of the Christian faith.
And it means something totally different.
Right? The faith is the feeling I get in my heart. Faith is hope. Faith is this. Faith is Hebrews 11:1, blah, blah, blah. I've had Muslims say faith. Hindus say faith. Christians say faith. Atheists say faith.
Right. Yeah.
The reason I know that there's a ghost in the kitchen is because I take it to faith.
Well, this is what I want to try you on, because I agree with your definition of faith there, but the kind of immediate, like the calling it desperate, for instance, which is a commonality, I think. What you said, it's that something else was even more desperate than faith, implying faith as a kind of desperation to it. Well, which I think a lot of times it does, but I'm interested because, again, it's like with the truth thing we discussed earlier. It's very easy to say, don't have beliefs that are untestable, but everybody does. And I don't just mean that they do without realizing they're untestable. I mean beliefs at the very foundation of our knowledge, which have to be based on untestable assertions. And like I know, as a matter of fact, I would claim at least that you hold certain of those beliefs just as I do and just as everybody does. Things like the trust in epistemology to begin with is an untestable thing. The trust of your senses and the trust that these things at the foundation of knowledge. And it's that horrible kind of skeptic spiral that you go into. And a lot of people want to avoid it, and I'm fine with avoiding it. I'm fine with putting that on the shelf. The question for me, to someone like you, would be if we're willing to say, well, yeah, okay, so I can't prove that my senses work. I can't prove that induction is actually accurate, but let's just put that on the shelf. Like, we all know that they do. Let's just put that on the shelf and move on. Like, isn't that just what the presuppositionalists will do with those kinds of beliefs? They'll say, like, I know I can't prove this, but we all know it's the case, so let's just move on.
It seems to me that a presuppositionalist might go one step further, so a presuppositionalist is born. They're a baby. They drink milk, they go to bed, they are making certain assumptions about the nature of the world, they learn to read words, they read holy books, for example, and they come to the conclusion that now that they can presuppose that their God is real. So all of us are coming with the presupposition that the world as we see it, this is actually reality, it's going to be consistent from day to day. I wasn't just poofed into existence 5 minutes ago. These are presuppositions that we all make. It does seem to me that presuppositionalists, whether you're a Hare Krishna, and I've actually seen a Hare Krishna precept, Muslim, Christian, or whatever, they tend to go one step further, and it seems unnecessary.
Okay, but outside of that specific example then, in the context of looking at the beliefs at the foundation of your own knowledge as essentially what you defined as faith, is faith bad?
I think that there are lots of things that we have faith in or untestable trust in. And here's the thing. When I discover that I have untestable trust in a claim, my confidence in it doesn't go up. It tends to go down.
So how confident are you that I'm here right now, that you're here right now, that this room exists? Like, because to me,
I wouldn't put it at 100%.
Well, I don't think anybody would, but most people, at the very least, have a conviction to put it somewhere quite high up.
Right.
And it's not so much. It might be the case that this all exists. It's like it probably is, but there's a small possibility it isn't. But there's actually no way to judge that. There's no way to judge that weighting of probability. And so that itself, like even the weighing up of it, is itself an untestable assertion, and itself would therefore, by your definition, be based on faith. So, if it is the case that the more untestable your assertion is, the less you trust in it. Well, these are assertions that are completely untestable, and so that seems to imply that your trust in them should be near zero. But I'd imagine it's not. It's probably closer up to like 99%.
Right.
But why do you think that's the case?
I wish I had a good answer for that. I mean, it seems like we don't probably have a choice but to assert that these things are true,
right,
until they could probably be demonstrated otherwise. Now, what I find though is that there are these base presumptions that we make about the nature of reality, and that you're here, that we're actually here in the same room enjoying the same reality. It may not be the case. I'm not 100% sure that it is. when we tend to see people who are using faith in for religious beliefs or whatever, or whether the ghost really was in the room, and then they mention faith, and then maybe they define it as trust, and then maybe we come to realize that they don't have the ability to test it. We actually do, it seems, have the ability to test certain things. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, I might have faith or trust that my car is still in the parking lot because I parked it there, and I actually have the key in my pocket, and I'm pretty sure I locked it. Now, it could have been towed. Is that untestable trust? We actually could pause the show and walk out there and verify it. Or maybe one of my friends can walk out there and give me a thumbs up that it's still there.
So it's like, is it verifiable versus is it verified? So like with induction, for instance, the process of reasoning about the unobserved world from the observed world. So like reasoning about the future, for instance, like you can't know, as Hume pointed out, that the sun will rise tomorrow. It's not possible. But in principle, that is a verifiable claim because it will eventually be verified. Mm-hmm. It's just not verified at the time that we've made the claim.
It's so funny you say that because I do meet a lot of people, particularly religious folks, who say, well, I have faith that it's true. And then we start talking about the testability of it. And it's very common for people to say, well, we'll find out what the truth is when we die.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, right?
Right.
But you've got I think you've got a problem with this line of thinking, which is that all of this probabilistic thinking is all based on the very thing that we're kind of trying to criticize here, which is this definition of faith. Like the whole idea that we can take concepts and have them linked, like past events being linked with future events, like the fact that every single time this show has gone on to air, I mean, the atheist experience, the right people have been in the right place, there's been a studio audience, the sun has not fallen out of the sky, like that we can reason that because of these things have previously kind of gone together with the atheist experience show happening, that we know that it's going to happen again, is completely unjustified. Bertrand Russell makes a great example of a chicken, right? You're a chicken, and like in a farm situation, and every single day, the farmer comes to you and brings you your food. Now, to the chicken, all it's ever known from the farmer is the farmer bringing food. To the chicken, the farmer and the food are probably as inseparable as to us something like dropping a pen and it falling to the floor. Like it's every single time we've dropped any object, it falls to the floor. But for the chicken, every single time the farmer comes, it brings its food. But one day that farmer's going to come and wring its neck instead. And one day we might well try to drop something and it just whacks us in the face. One day we might try to administer a medicine and it just destroys the human race. Like every single belief that we hold in science and the future is completely based on the same logic as the chicken, which is merely, I think it's probably going to happen again. Like that seems like a horrible thing to be basing, not just, some beliefs, but all the beliefs that we hold, and some of the most important too, like the entire construct of science, it's all based upon this. Mm-hmm. And I find it difficult as somebody who'd want to go out, such as yourself, and challenge people saying, well, let's get down to the basis of why you believe what you believe and what you're kind of basing that upon. When, like yourself and myself, if we do that to ourselves, we realize that we're in no place to
we're all in the same boat,
to ask
aren't we?
those questions.
We're all in the same boat.
Why, let's do that to ourselves, and we come to a conclusion that we should probably just have no faith and no trust in the whole, in the entire enterprise.
The thing is, I don't really see an option. I mean, how would we actually decide to get out of bed if we didn't make those certain assumptions, right? Like,
right.
Unless we just want to kind of curl up in a ball and just hope it all goes away.
Don't you think that sounds a lot like when a religious person says, "But if there wasn't a God and I became convinced there was no God, like how am I going to get out of bed in the morning? And I'm just going to curl up in a ball." Like, it kind of seems like it's the same kind of thinking,
Possibly, but if you think about it, we hear the same similar claims about completely different deities. Right? Like, so a Muslim might tell me the same thing, a Hindu might tell me the same thing, a Christian, for example, might tell me the same thing. And yet the reason that they're putting forward is wildly different. So I think there's probably some value there where you see differences in the explanation for why they can assert that this is going to happen.
Yeah, right. Okay. But to me, it's just one of those problems of philosophy. It's one of those things that is just insurmountable. And in accepting that, I think we have to be a bit more charitable when people do the same thing in other areas of thought. And it might be less justifiable to do it in other areas of thought, but I don't think we can so quickly just dismiss that kind of style of reasoning, like just dismissing the idea of faith as defined as assertions without evidence or verifiability. I don't think we can so easily just say that that's necessarily a bad thing, given that we're doing it every single day. But it's one of those insurmountable things for me. I don't know if that's as big of a problem to you as it is for me. Whenever I'm doing philosophy, I need to constantly seem like I'm bearing this in mind. I need to ensure that I'm not having any kind of inconsistencies in the way I'm criticizing others for their thought. I need to make sure that it's consistent with the own assumptions that I hold. Is it a big problem for you, or are you willing to kind of just put it on the shelf?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd put it on the shelf per se, but I think you've given me something to think about with regards to that. I don't know. I guess that's probably one of the things I just want to think about to see if that has legs.
It's worth it. But like everybody thinks about it at some point, and like I say, most people just come to the conclusion that it's just not touchable. You've just got to find some way to find the motivation to just move around it.
We were talking earlier about the harm that these beliefs can cause people.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the barometer, perhaps, where if we are trying to avoid harm and reduce suffering, and we realize that we're basing something on faith, untestable trust, perhaps that's the barometer.
I think it might make sense to say let's avoid faith at all costs. Let's avoid
as much as you possibly can. Kind of like the precept.
Yeah, exactly. It's like avoid as much faith as possible.
Recognize perhaps that there are instances where you have to have untestable trust, but try to limit its usage, perhaps.
Yeah. I think so. As my friend Steve says, you've got to spend money to make money, right? You've got to have that bit of. You've got to have it going in both directions. But I don't know. It's tricky, and that's one of the reasons I enjoy talking to someone like yourself about it, because you are like a professional conversationalist, and it's one of those areas that can only really be engaged with through conversation, I think.
I agree, and perhaps we're not the best people to actually be hashing it out, but maybe this starts a dialogue in the comments section below or elsewhere. Yeah,
but that's the thing, because because you talk on such a wide variety of issues, most of the time you're talking about them like you're not an expert. You're just asking questions,
right?
And that's sometimes all it takes, right?
And actually, I find it somewhat advantageous to be somewhat ignorant on the topic being discussed, because you can ask what somebody might perceive to be a very basic question. It could actually relax the person because you're asking a very softball question, and yet when they go through the process of explaining it, they may say, "Well, you know what? That's such a basic question. Why am I struggling to answer that?" Yeah, and it can be really humbling, and you start really rethinking.
Yeah, sometimes things break down to like
the whole enterprise.
The simplest question. I remember when I was talking about meta-ethics with Steve, Rationality Rules. We were having a big disagreement about it, and we've hashed it out quite a bit. I'm trying to remember what the exact question was, because he was like, he sees morality as goal-based, and he sees this view of hypothetical norms. Like, if you have this goal, then you ought to do it. Then you ought to do this if this achieves the goal. If you have this goal and X achieves the goal, then you ought to do X. Like, if you want to achieve the goal,
regardless of the consequences.
Well, no, I just mean as like a general principle. Like, if you've got goal X and Y gets you there, then you should do Y on the assumption that you want to do goal X. And I just asked, well, why ought you do that which you want? And he just, and if I asked him it now, like, no problem, we could talk about it for ages, but it was just, he just kind of went like, and it's such a silly question. It's like, well, it's not necessarily true that we ought to do what we want. Like, that's a silly thing to do. But then he suddenly realized how that question fit into the system, and it was just kind of funny, because we had one of those moments where it was just like, why is this such a difficult question to answer? There's
a phenomena called the illusion of explanatory depth. I don't know if you've heard of it or not.
I don't think so.
So, for example, I might say, "Can you tell me how email works? Are you able to explain it?" And most people would say, "Well, of course."
Yeah, right.
And then 3 minutes into your explanation of it, you might come to realize, I have no clue how this fucking thing works.
Yeah, I can't remember where I heard this, but someone once sort of brought this up to me by talking about like how a toilet works.
That's right.
Yeah,
I think there's a TED Talk out on it.
Maybe, yeah. And it just made me think, like, damn, yeah, I have no idea how that thing works.
I don't know what forces that waste down, and where does it go, and
sucking?
how does the water flow back in? How does it know to stop?
How long does it take? I don't even know that.
Exactly. And then that's the cool thing about these conversations is that it becomes humbling, not only for the person who's on the receiving end of the questions, but on the practitioner.
Yeah, right.
It changes you.
Yeah.
So I'm much more tolerable, perhaps, of people who I disagree with, because I begin to realize I could very well be in their shoes if I was exposed to the same stimuli.
Yeah, but I think you're right that it's kind of humbling, because you can kind of, like, I know you wouldn't say this, but implicitly, it's like you have the ability to sit around and say, okay, so you know who the creator of the universe is, and you know this creator's aims, and you know its purpose, but you don't know how a bloody toilet works? Like, are you kidding me? You're right. I think it's totally humbling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think this conversation's been a good one. I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. I didn't pay close attention to exactly what time we started, but I think we're coming up to about an hour.
I wasn't noticing the time, and we're kind of expecting someone to whisper in our ear if we get too close to the end.
I think it's all good, because we got to get out here so that Talk Heathen can set up and start their show.
It's going to be a party too. We have a lot of people coming in from out of town just to hang out here.
Yeah, because everybody here at the everybody's been here for Faithless Forum. We've had a lot of people come down, originally to Dallas, and a bunch of us have driven to Austin to come and hang out at the ACA. So there's going to be a whole host of YouTubers here. So there's going to be, and there's some people here. You guys can hear us, right? So it's the first ever episode of the Cosmic Skeptic podcast with a live studio audience. How about that?
And hopefully not the last.
Yeah, hopefully not the last. Love the sound of it. And I should record that and put it in all of my podcasts. That would be fun. But yeah, it's gonna be great. I mean, there's gonna be a room just full of YouTubers, which is a rarity.
I'm not really sure what to expect. We have a lot of people coming down from the Faithless Forum.
I don't.
A lot of local folks. It's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be a bit packed, but it's gonna be definitely fun. And I'll be hosting the Atheist Experience, so I'll remind you, if you're listening, check it out. Episode aired on the 28th of April. I think it's going to be an absolute blast, and if it goes really badly, then I'll probably edit this out of this part of the podcast so that none of you ever find it, but hopefully that won't be necessary. But I think, that's a great place to end it. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's been great.
It was really great.
So, thanks for coming on. So for those listening, with all that said, I've been Alex O'Connor, and I've been in conversation today with Anthony Magnabosco.